Welcome to another episode of Courageous Conversations Live. I'm your host, Pierre Quinn, and here on Courageous Conversations, we're leveraging the stories of leaders, of entrepreneurs, of creatives to help you live and lead with greater courage. So joining me on this episode, really looking forward to this conversation and dialogue today. On this episode, we have Mr. Kevin Wayne Johnson. Mr. Johnson, thanks for being my guest today.
Absolutely. It's a delight to be here. Thank you for the invitation. Look forward to the conversation.
And for all of you who are stopping the scroll and who are checking us out right now, or even checking out the replay, we got a couple of things that we really appreciate your help on. The first one is hop in the comment section. We love to do shout outs here on a Courageous Conversation. So live or replay, let us know that you are hanging out with us. The second thing is, I'm pretty sure you're going to have a conversation, a question for Kevin about his work. So drop that in the comment section too. And number 3, hit the share button, because sharing is caring. And we want as many leaders exposed to this conversation as possible. So Mr. Johnson, set us up, give us that Cliff Notes, that elevator pitch, that commercial version about who you are and what you do.
Well, let me just start out by just saying this. I happen to be a person that originated from Richmond, Virginia, and I now live in the Howard County area of the state of Maryland, which is about halfway between our nation's capital and the city of Baltimore. Happily married 28 years, the father of 3 sons, 23, 24, and 25, all of whom helped me to become a servant leader, because leadership does start in the home. I'm also the son of a U.S. Marine. Needless to say, I learned a little bit about leadership there, and also being disciplined in everything that I do. So after I retired from the federal government, 34 years of total service, I'm spending this chapter of my life pouring into the lives of the current and next generation of leaders and having an absolute blast.
I love that. I love that. Let's hop in the time machine and let's go back a little bit. Talk a little bit about some of those lessons and perspectives that you gleaned from having a parent in the military. What were some things that you picked up that you still, in some regards, find yourself passing on to your kids or even using today?
Absolutely. Perfect lead into our conversation today, this courageous conversation as we talk about servant leadership. My dad was the oldest of 7 children. In Richmond, Virginia, when he came out of high school, he didn't really have very many options looking at him. So he enlisted in the United States Marine Corps following his dad, my grandfather, who served in the U.S. Navy as a career. And although he went in enlisted, during his time of service, he was commissioned and he became an officer while he was serving. So following 2 tours of duty in Vietnam and 1 tour of duty in Okinawa, Japan, he also had the acumen and the intel and the insight to pursue being an officer, leading other men and women as we protect the nation and do some really great things. So I watched that as a young man growing up, and I watched him transition from, again, being enlisted to eventually, after 20 years, retiring as a junior officer, a first lieutenant. I used to watch him in Parris Island, South Carolina, as a drill sergeant, working with the recruits and instilling that discipline and that approach to what it takes to be a Marine and to be a leader, but then come home and be compassionate and empathetic as he's raising his 2 sons, me the oldest, and my younger brother, Eric, being about 3.5 years younger than I am. So I saw both angles of what it takes to be an effective leader, depending on the audience that we're leading. And so that's sort of my journey. Fast forward to what I'm doing now and what I've been doing as an adolescent, as a young man, and now as a senior gentleman, having the opportunity in the workplace, in my church, in my social and civic organizations, in my neighborhood, to lead people, to set the tone, to be the model, to set the example, and exhibiting respect, honor, value, but also equally important, compassion and empathy, along with the acumen and the intel that we bring to the table. That's how you go about leading people, getting them to want to contribute, to want to be involved, to want to attend. That's the power of good leadership. And Pierre, listen, I really believe this when I say it, because I say it in all circles, that good leaders help to make the world a much better place.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So as you're sharing this story and taking us through memory lane, there's some pieces that are kind of sticking out to me. And you may find people who say their perspective is, okay, Mr. Johnson, that's I, I hear what you're saying, and it sounds nice, but you don't understand my context. On my job, it's so easy. They listen to what I say. I have great staff that bring their best. It's an awesome experience. I'm able to pour into them, but when I go home, it's not like that. And they don't listen and they don't bring their best. And it's really hard. And sometimes we see this duality of a leader who on their job, they're winning awards and doing amazing work and everyone lauds their efforts. But then this person does not have that same impact and effectiveness and transformation uh, where they live and where they play. What would you say to leaders who are maybe struggling or maybe even looking to shift blame as it relates to what's happening at home versus the perception of the success that they're having at work?
Yeah, so without simplifying it too much, if you're having success in your workplace, it's because at some level you've taken the time to understand your audience, who you're dealing with, who you're interacting with, what makes them tick, what ticks them off, how are you bringing people together, what is their personality, what's their behavioral style, their leadership style. So when we come home, let's practice what we put in place in the workplace.
Mm.
What's that spouse's personality? What makes them tick? What ticks them off? Are you a good listener? What about the children that you're raising and you're nurturing and you're instructing, you're training and you're teaching? Are you a good listener? Are you asking them for their opinion, their views, their perspectives? After all, everyone wants to be heard. Everyone wants to be valued. So the same attributes and characteristics that you're displaying at work to win the awards, to get the accolades, to get the promotion, to get the recognition and the visibility and the accountability that comes with it, we can also transition that same type of behavior in the work in the home and making sure that we listen and get the contributions and perspectives of those at home. And then you'll start to see some things turn around.
We have an amazing leader, communicator, entrepreneur checking in with us on LinkedIn Live. Fran Harris, her comments are sometimes folks are better at work because their behavior is under a microscope. And that performance evaluation, that performance review is coming up. What are your thoughts on that, Mr. Johnson? As we have that microscope, we know our job is on the line, that performance evaluation is coming up, but not feeling maybe that same pressure or perception because the cameras are not rolling, or at least we don't think they are.
Right.
when we're at home.
Right. Well, they're rolling in a different way. So in the workplace, needless to say, we have a job description that's very definitive. We're in a work role, which we've sort of mastered, and we brought the necessary acumen and intel and skills and knowledge and abilities to be able to get that particular position. And of course, we're getting paid and we're getting benefits. So there's a certain type of behavior that fits to that model. Whereas when we're at home, of course, it's voluntary, okay? And it's not so much defined that you and I can't go to the local bookstore and pick up a book on how to be a good parent. It doesn't work that way. We just have to roll with it.
Yeah.
But again, like I said earlier, if we put to practice the same behaviors, the same mannerisms, the same attitude in the home, working with our spouse and our children and grandparents and cousins, etc., that we do at work, that is listen, ask for their contributions and their perspectives. One thing we do in the Johnson household, Peter, is on Sunday evenings at 8 p.m., we have our weekly family meeting where we have a conversation about finances, about emotional well-being, how you're taking care of your body, are you exercising, are you staying hydrated, are you eating the right foods, how are things going in general? And mom and dad always ask before we end, how can we help you? And we do a little round table. So each of our sons has an opportunity just to give a quick update on what's happening. Or if they want to take a long time to elaborate, we open that door for them as well. Why? Because we're listening. And it's through the listening that the other person, the recipient, gets that feeling that somebody actually cares. Someone values what it is I have to say. And that's the power. So something as small as a half hour to 45-minute family meeting to get the perspectives on how people are doing, how can I help you? It's the same thing we do on the job, but we just sort of do it a little bit differently. But if you would take some of these practices and apply them in the home, you'll start to see some things turn around.
If you're just stopping the scroll on social media, Pierre Quinn here, host of Courageous Conversations Live, and hanging out with Kevin and Wayne Johnson. We're talking about his role, his journey, and we're sitting under the heading Leading with a Servant's Heart. So I invite you to hop in the comment section. We'd love to give you a shout out during our conversation today. I got to ask you, Kevin, as it relates to even that conversation, the perspective of that conversation and setting the table when your children are younger or in your household in general, how often is it when you're doing training and development, when you're doing coaching and consulting, that you come across organizations who part of their struggle is somewhere along the line, these people who were super smart, incredibly intelligent, gifted and talented, could excel academically, but they never learned how to sit around a table and talk to each other and share their feelings and perspectives and insights and emotions and challenges, and how much of your work is along the lines of actually teaching people how to do that once again.
Yeah, absolutely. So what you just highlight is symptomatic of not understanding how to connect with people and how not to be able to get to the common ground. Those are two key principles with communication: being able to connect, because conversations, dialogue, and discussions are two-way, not one-way. You can intend to send a message to someone, but if they don't receive it in the manner in which it was intended, you haven't communicated. And then also trying to find that common ground. When you can find common ground and you can connect with who you're having a conversation with, that will take you a very long way in terms of understanding each other, being able to navigate for each other, influencing one another. And so a lot of this, Peter, unfortunately, is not taught in school. We don't get this in elementary, middle, and high school, and a lot of colleges don't even teach it. Generally speaking, it happens once we move into the workforce, and then we begin to help people at the front line, mid-level, and even the senior level leaders. We help them to understand these principles, because a lot of people are very smart. There's a high degree of acumen and intelligence, but not necessarily emotional intelligence, and not necessarily understanding your personality style or your behavioral style and how it fits in individually as well as with the team. You know, this concept of people not being able to work together in a team is crippling our country, because together everyone achieves more. That's the acronym for team. Together everyone achieves more. And people that don't understand that, literally, we're crippling our government and we're crippling our corporations as well.
The challenge for a lot of organizations and a lot of leadership teams is we have lost or maybe misinterpreted what it means to serve our organizations, our families, and our organizations. What's the mindset that you had when you begin crafting the content or the initial principles behind leading with a servant's heart?
Yeah, well, when we serve, first of all, serving other people is just good for you. All right. It's very therapeutic. It keeps you happy, joyful, fulfilled. It's good for your health. And I firmly believe that that's how God created us, to serve others. We take focus off of ourselves, because when we're so focused on self, we tend to have a lot of garbage, if you would, for lack of a better word, with comparing ourselves to how other people are doing. But when you take focus off of yourself and you spend time serving others in a lot of different capacities, you feel so much better about who you are and why you were created. And you happen to better understand your purpose and your plan for actually being here. So leading with a servant's heart, that's literally what it's all about, because each and every one of us are leaders. Leadership is not based on position or title.
Mhm.
It's who you are in the heart, the core, the DNA of who you are. And when you serve other people, I tell everybody all the time, just try it, test it, prove me wrong.
Yeah.
When you serve other people, you feel so good about what you've done. And if you wash, rinse, and repeat and continue to do that, that's really what leadership is all about. Leadership is not about sitting up in a high chair and espousing your subject matter expertise on everyone, or reminding everyone that you're in charge, because people already know you're in charge.
Mhm.
I never have to tell my sons that I'm the dad in this house, because they already know it, right? Because I serve them, and that's what it's all about. So that's the focus of the conversation and the discussion in terms of how we teach, how we train, how we coach, and how we mentor in this space called leadership. Because again, good leaders make the world a much better place. The world becomes a much better place because we are serving each other and we understand the why and the mechanics and the strategies and principles that govern helping people to mature, helping people to develop, helping people to get better, being an advocate. All of that is tied into what leadership is truly all about.
If we hopped in a Google search and we looked up leadership development, leadership coach, leadership training, we would have scores and scores and scores and scores of pages of people who make the proclamation that this is the work that they do. In a sense, we're getting to a space where they're a dime a dozen. When you look at the work that you do with the Johnson Leadership Group, what perspective are you bringing to the conversation on leadership that allows you in your work to be so successful? What's the not necessarily angle, but what's the shift that you've been able to make at this stage in your career to be so impactful in the marketplace, even amid all the noise that's happening when so many people are claiming to be coaches and consultants?
Yeah, and that's a great question, Pierre. And it's actually been that way for quite a while. We're focusing on it a little bit more now in the virtual environment, but even prior to the pandemic, it had been that way. We take a threefold approach, which I think is a key differentiator in terms of what's going on there, and not only in the United States, but in the global marketplace. Number one, our approach is to encourage participation, communication, discussion, and dialogue. We have way too many people in our society that are internalizing how they feel.
Yeah.
And when you internalize how you feel, there's no opportunity to have a conversation and a discussion about how we can make the transformative changes in a person's life so that they can tap into who they really are. So that's number one. Number two, really big on assessments.
Mhm.
So we have opportunities to, whether it's an individual, a team, or a group, or an entire organization, to walk them through where they are in terms of their emotional intelligence, where they are in terms of their behavior style, that's the DISC,
Mhm.
and where they are in terms of their personality style, that's the Myers-Briggs, as well as their own leadership style, that's the Leadership 360. Those assessments are very important because people just aren't self-aware. It's not a criticism,
Mhm.
and it's not even a foul, but it's part of the learning who you are so that you can be effective when you're entrusted with the responsibility to lead others. We're not going to be successful leading others until we first are in tune with ourselves. So that's a second differentiator. And then the third differentiator is then after we have done what we've said we're going to do in step one and step two, now we can move into the training and have the opportunity to start teaching what you don't know, or reinforce perhaps what you do know,
Mhm.
or getting you to move out on an action plan, actually implement and execute what you now learned. And all of this is in writing such that people can always go back and take a look, because we don't remember much of what's been said, but you can always go back and take a look. And that's been the difference maker, whether it's a city, state, or federal government, whether it's a small to medium-sized corporation, a faith-based organization, academia, or nonprofit. We work across all of those different areas, because when it's all said and done, people for the most part are the same, but they work in different venues, which has a slightly different mission, vision, and core value. So those are the three differentiators. It's a complete process as opposed to a piecemeal process, because we want people to understand themselves to be in a position to lead others.
I'm going to ask you specifically about the types of clients that you're looking to connect with and the leaders you're looking to connect with specifically right now. But before I do that, because you mentioned assessments, I got to bring this up. Just really, I want you to pull on this a little bit. Whenever I take my car to the mechanic, in spite of what I say to my mechanic, he always connects it to his diagnostic. Or
Right.
even if you go to the emergency room, in spite of what you say, in some form or fashion, they're going to run a diagnostic. They're going to run a test. And in many cases, we come to embrace that. Why is it when it comes to leadership development, team building, personality preference, behavioral style, do sometimes we push back on the concept or the use of assessments as a part of the process, whereas in other spaces of our lives, we embrace the idea wholeheartedly?
Yeah. So part of our human element, Pierre, is to reject something that we either don't understand or we just decided that we don't want to come in alignment with. That can't be true. I'm 48 years old. That can't be true. Nobody's ever told me that before. But what it does is it's a point of self-discovery is what it is. And it's the approach. Again, prior to the assessment, before we get there, that's step two. Step one is getting people comfortable with having a conversation. Let's communicate. Let's have some dialogue. I don't care if you're on the far end of being an extrovert or on the far end of being an introvert or somewhere in between. Let's stop internalizing what you feel and what you've been carrying around. Let's get it out so that now we can take that step forward with self-awareness. And then the assessments bring us even closer to understanding who we are. It's a state of self-discovery and coming in agreement and acknowledging and recognizing that this is who you are at the core so that you can be the best person that you can be. Because if you don't even understand who you are, if you don't know anything at all about your personality, then how are you going to deal with another person who has a personality on the other end of the spectrum? And so that's the differentiator, getting people to come in agreement, recognize and acknowledge, this is who I am, so I can move forward. And it's really, the power is really in the action plan. It's the plan of action. So now that we know this, what is the plan of action? And we put it in writing. It's a written document, plan of action, so that now we can implement and we can execute. And then not to mention the follow-up. There's also follow-up as a part of what we do as well. I don't just disappear. So whether you're at the front line, just getting started with this leadership journey, at the mid-level, you've been doing it for a while and you're on the fence. I don't think I really want to continue to work with people, or I like this and I want to learn more so I can get to the next level. And then the senior level folks, they have arrived, but they still need a refresher and they still need to stay plugged into reality in terms of what's going on, because we have the Gen Zs now coming into the workforce. They don't think like the millennials or the baby boomers. And so we need to know that we need a refresher. So we touch on all three of those different audiences in a slightly different way. But when it's all said and done, a solid action plan that people can follow going forward.
Amazing stuff. I knew we were going to run out of time in this conversation, but we got to set it up so we can do the plugs. First plug, let's talk about give us a recap of the book again and where we could get a copy of it and what's going on with you in that regard.
Well, Leadership with a Servant's Heart is a book that I published on the topic of leadership, specifically to encourage, to motivate, to educate, and to raise the level of awareness with all of the men and women out there, not just in the US, but around the world, that have a desire to be better leaders. And you'll see a big image of the heart, because it's in the heart. That's the DNA and the core of who we are. The book has been doing very, very well. It's been well received across the publishing industry. As a matter of fact, it was released in late 2019. While we were in the pandemic in 2020, the book actually picked up 8 literary awards.
Wow.
And now, even though we're in 2021, the publishing industry is still recognizing it. And so it's being considered. I'm a finalist as we speak for the Black Authors Matter TV Awards program, which will be officially kicked off on May 18th. But I'm a finalist in this particular area. And I'll send you some information on that as well. But the bottom line is really just to help men and women around the world to better understand from a servant's perspective. We can do this. We can lead people with a servant's heart, with compassion and with empathy, but at the same time demonstrating that we are subject matter experts. We have a great deal of intel and we have the acumen. We know our stuff, but we are leading people with empathy and with compassion. It's a difference maker, because people, generally speaking, they do want to be treated well. They want to be respected. They want to know that you care, and they want to be valued. And as leaders, we can get this done. We can do it. I've seen it done. I've done it. I know we can do it.
And I know Mr. Anderson on LinkedIn, and amazing coach and trainer as well. Sherrod, checking in on LinkedIn as well. Understand that very, very well. Speaking of LinkedIn and social media in general, as it relates to the Johnson Leadership Group and the clients you're looking to work with, the organizations you're looking to work with, who should click on your LinkedIn profile? Who should go to the johnsonleadershipgroup.com and send you a message on your contact page? Who should reach out and get connected so that you can do some great work together?
Yeah, well, needless to say, those organizations within the training department, the training unit, it usually falls under the Department of Human Resources. It usually falls under the auspices of the Chief Learning Officer, or the training manager themselves would be the type of people that would probably be seeking someone in the local community or across the nation that could come in and add these strategies and principles to the workforce. So typically those would be the individuals, but also CEOs of their own businesses, heads of departments across corporations, across government agencies and nonprofits as well, would find the information to be very useful, and would find the information to be would add value to what it is they're trying to do. You do a lot of work to attract really good people to your organization. The next step is to retain them. And one of the many resources that's available for these chief learning officers, these heads of these departments, the training managers, the HR professionals, is to get your people some really good training, get them to know who they are at the core, make them feel better about themselves, and put them in a position to help others to feel good about themselves as well.
Fantastic conversation. I want to thank you in advance for everyone who is going to go to the website, the johnsonleadershipgroup.com, who's going to click on your LinkedIn profile. The link to your website is in the description box for this conversation. So I want to thank you in advance for all of those leaders who are going to bring you in for coaching, consulting, training with their organization. All the best on the journey with the book. I know you're going to do incredibly well. You've won so many literary awards up to this point, and I know future success will be close behind. And also, I want to thank you for being an amazing guest on Courageous Conversations Live today.
Well, I thank you as well, sir, for all the great work that you're doing. This is a phenomenal platform. You're doing outstanding work. I'm behind the scenes. I'm one of your biggest cheerleaders. And I'm going to keep pushing you forward, because you're very encouraging and very motivating to a lot of people. So thank you for all that you do.
Appreciate that, sir. We'll talk again soon. Okay.
All right. Be well.
Take care.